Imagine two countries shaking hands in one decade and pointing missiles at each other in the next. No war formally declared, no single moment where everything broke, just a long, slow unraveling, shaped by oil, ideology, and decisions made in smoke-filled rooms that ordinary people on both sides would spend generations paying for. How does a strategic partnership collapse so completely that the word negotiation becomes politically toxic? How do allies become the face of each other's enemy? This is that story. Before we begin, ensure you smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. To understand this relationship, you first have to understand why Iran was never just another country on the map. Sit it on a globe and look at it. Iran borders the Persian Gulf to the south, one of the most critical oil transit corridors on Earth. It shares frontiers with Iraq, Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the former Soviet republics. In the mid-20th century, as the Cold War began reshaping every alliance and rivalry on the planet, that geography alone made Iran indispensable. Add to that some of the world's largest oil reserves, and you have a country that every major power wanted in their corner. For the United States, keeping Iran out of the Soviet sphere wasn't just a preference, it was a strategic priority. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Iran had a democratically elected prime minister named Mohammad Mosaddegh. He was wildly popular, and he had one defining mission: take Iran's oil wealth back from foreign control. At the time, a British company, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, controlled the majority of Iran's oil revenues. Mossadegh nationalized the industry in 1951, meaning Iran would own its own oil. Britain was furious. The United States was nervous. And in 1953, the CIA and British intelligence engineered a covert operation, codenamed Ajax, that removed Mossadegh from power and reinstalled Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi on the throne. Pause and think about what that meant for ordinary Iranians. A democratically elected leader, removed by foreign governments protecting foreign interests. The US would not formally acknowledge its role until decades later, but in Iran, people knew, and they remembered. That single decision planted a seed of distrust that never fully died. For the next 25 years, the Shah was America's man in Tehran. He modernized the country, building infrastructure, expanding education, pushing social reforms that unsettled traditional society. Western investment flowed in. Iran became one of the most powerful military forces in the region, armed substantially by the United States. But modernization came with a brutal underside. The Shah's secret police, known as Savak, monitored, imprisoned, and tortured political opponents. Dissent was not tolerated, and while Washington expressed quiet concerns privately, publicly the alliance held firm. What happens when a government prioritizes a useful partner over the people that partner rules? That tension would eventually answer itself. By the late 1970s, Iran was a pressure cooker. Religious conservatives, leftists, students, and ordinary citizens who had lived under Savak's shadow for years found a unifying voice in Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a cleric who had spent years in exile, broadcasting a vision of an Iran governed by Islamic law, free from Western influence. In January 1979, the Shah fled the country. In February, Khomeini returned to Tehran and millions came to receive him. The Islamic Republic was born, and its foundational identity was, in no small part, built on opposition to American influence. The United States had just lost its most important regional ally almost overnight. The rupture became permanent in November 1979. When the United States allowed the exiled Shah to enter America for medical treatment, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats hostage. They would remain captive for 444 days. Television brought the crisis into American living rooms every night. Public fury hardened into lasting national resentment. A rescue mission failed catastrophically in the Iranian desert. The hostages were finally released, pointedly, on the day Ronald Reagan was inaugurated in January 1981. the diplomatic relationship between the two countries has never formally recovered. The following decade was defined by a conflict that made everything more complicated. In 1980, Iraq's Saddam Hussein invaded Iran. The war would last 8 years and kill hundreds of thousands. The United States, viewing Iran as the greater threat, quietly supported Iraq, sharing intelligence and enabling weapons transfers, even as evidence emerged that Iraq was using chemical weapons against Iranian forces and Kurdish civilians. Then came Iran-Contra. The Reagan administration, in a covert operation that stunned the public when it emerged, had secretly sold weapons to Iran, in part to fund rebels in Nicaragua, despite a public embargo. The contradiction was staggering. Washington was supporting both sides of the same war. Trust, what little remained, eroded further on both sides. Through the 1990s, the United States tightened economic sanctions on Iran, essentially cutting off large portions of Iran's access to international trade and finance. Sanctions are a tool of pressure. Make the economic pain high enough and a government may change its behavior. Iran didn't fundamentally change, and its nuclear program began drawing serious international attention. In 2002, President George W. Bush named Iran part of an axis of evil alongside Iraq and North Korea. 2 years later, the Iraq War had destabilized the region, ironically expanding Iranian influence in the process. The nuclear question moved to the center of everything. In 2015, after years of painstaking diplomacy, the Obama administration and 5 other world powers reached a landmark agreement with Iran, the Joint Comprehensive Action Plan, known as the JCPOA. In plain terms, Iran agreed to dramatically limit its nuclear enrichment activities, making it far harder to develop a nuclear weapon in exchange for significant sanctions relief. International inspectors would verify compliance. It was imperfect, but it was working. In 2018, President Trump withdrew the United States from the deal unilaterally, calling it the worst agreement ever negotiated, and reimposed sweeping sanctions. Iran gradually walked back its own commitments. The diplomatic architecture collapsed.
The years that followed brought the relationship to some of its most dangerous edges. Iranian-linked forces attacked oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. U.S. troops faced rocket attacks from Iranian-backed militias across Iraq and Syria. Proxy conflicts, wars fought through allied or funded forces rather than direct confrontation, spread across the region like slow-burning fires. Then, in January 2020, the United States killed General Qasem Soleimani, the commander of Iran's elite Quds force, in a drone strike at Baghdad airport. Soleimani was arguably the most powerful military figure in Iran after the supreme leader. Tehran vowed retaliation. The world braced. War did not come, but the region has not stabilized either. So here is where 7 decades of history leave us. 2 countries that once saw mutual benefit in each other, bound now by a cycle of grievance, mistrust, and strategic competition neither side seems able or willing to fully break. The United States never fully reckoned with what the 1953 coup meant to Iranians. Iran never fully separated its governing ideology from the hostility to America that helped birth the Islamic Republic. And both governments have, at various moments, chosen the satisfying short-term move over the harder, longer work of building something durable. History rarely produces clean villains or clean heroes. What it produces is consequence. And in the case of the United States and Iran, the consequences are still unfolding. If this gave you a clearer picture of one of the most complex relationships in modern geopolitics, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And I want to hear from you. Which turning point in this story do you think changed everything? The 1953 coup, the 1979 revolution, or the collapse of the nuclear deal? Drop your answer in the comments.